Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of AD 33. My name's Sean. It's great to be with you today. So this is the month of October, and the month of October is a month where we recognize, among other things, the right to life. As Catholics, we protect all human life, and we recognize the dignity of the human person from the moment of conception until death. And October is a particular month that we think about this. Because of the laws that are in place in our country, though, there is a primacy in thinking about the protection of the unborn, the protection of human life in the womb. And so I thought it'd be fitting then for this month of October, at least to get an episode where we can talk a little bit about this and why we protect all human life, why every human being is deserving of the most fundamental right, the most fundamental human right, which is the right to life. And so that's what I want to talk about in today's episode. If you haven't already, though, before I dive in too much farther along, if you could, for me, it helps us out a ton. If you can like this video, just go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. That's all you got to do. Leave a comment below, and then definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the notifications of when we release a new episode. So just to begin, in the Psalms, there's a famous passage. You've probably heard it before. This is Psalm 139, verses 13 and 14 say, "You formed me in my inmost being. You knit me in my mother's womb. And I praise you because I'm wonderfully made." So as Catholic Christians, we hold, as I said, to the dignity of the human person. And we protect the right to life, especially those who are most vulnerable. And I want to talk about why we protect life as Catholics. Before I dive too much deeper into this episode, I just want to highlight this fantastic book. This is called Why We're Catholic. I've highlighted this before on the podcast. This is an excellent book for anyone who's at the very least interested in learning a little bit more about what we believe as Catholics and why we are Catholic. Even if you have no interest in becoming Catholic, you feel like that you don't care about that at all. But at the very least, you want to know why we believe the things that we do and what we actually believe, and not just mischaracterizations or misrepresentations of it, then I would highly recommend this book, Why We're Catholic, which goes into, gives a great introduction, overview of why we are Catholic and the different things that we believe. One of the chapters in there is called Why We Protect Life. And so that's why I titled this episode with the same title as the chapter in Horn's book. And so if you want to dive a little bit deeper even into this topic, that'd be a great sort of an additional next step beyond this episode. Check out Why We're Catholic. If you send me a private message, I'll send you a book for free. If you reach out to me, I'm happy to send you a book, Why We're Catholic, for free. And so check that book out and check out the chapter specifically if you want to dive a little bit deeper or learn a little bit more information, the chapter Why We Protect Life. And so let's begin here with the Catechism of the Catholic Church, okay? And so why we protect life as Catholics, the Catechism of the Catholic Church says in paragraph 2270, human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception. From the first moment of his existence, a human being must be recognized as having the rights of a person, among which is the inviolable right of every human being to life. So the right to life, this is the most fundamental of the human rights that we have. If you look at our country and you look at the history of civil rights abuses, human rights abuses in this country, a lot of times it has to do with taking a human being and making them in some way less than human or less than a person. Yeah, you're a human being, but you are lesser for some kind of a reason. And it's no different when we talk about this horrible human rights abuse that's happening in our country with this issue of abortion, that we treat the human beings who are in the womb as really not fully persons and therefore not deserving of full human rights. But again, this is just a really dangerous thing to be doing and a slippery slope. Whenever we've abused human beings in the past, in this country, and just in the world in general, it's usually whenever we say that to be human being is not enough. That because of X, Y, or Z, because of your skin color, because of your location, or because of what you can or can't do, that yeah, you might be a human being, but maybe you're not fully a person and not deserving of all human rights. And I would say that this is extremely dangerous way of thinking. And I think the Catechism here just summarizes very well, that all human life must be respected and protected from the moment of conception. Every human being has the rights of a person. And the most fundamental of those rights upon which all other rights come from, is the right to life. If we don't have the right to life, then really all other human rights become meaningless, because the right to life is the most fundamental of the rights that we possess as human beings. There's a common misconception that we only protect life as Catholics, or we're against abortion. We believe in the evil of abortion as Catholics just because of some kind of religious presupposition or a religious argument, or because this is a dogma, a teaching of the church. And while that is true, I accept the teaching of the Catholic Church that abortion is intrinsically evil, that it's always wrong, and there are no circumstances in which it could be permissible. I do accept that as a Catholic. It's actually not accurate to say that this belief and the sanctity of human life in the womb rests solely upon religious arguments. I would just say we don't even need to appeal to religion at all to demonstrate why abortion is evil and why every human being in the womb deserves the right to life and should not be killed, should be protected from being killed. And this is something that I think people have always understood. This is something that we can discern through human reason, through philosophy, through natural law, and I think just common sense, most fundamentally, which is connected even to these things. For example, like maybe two things that I'd point to is just an appeal to the intuition of our founding fathers and of human beings for a long time, especially because of the influence of Christianity, for sure, and also just an appeal to logic, reason, and common sense. And so if you think about like the Declaration of Independence, for example, our founding fathers famously said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." A very beautiful quote there, a very famous quote. So our founding fathers recognized the right to life to be something that was self-evident, something endowed in us by our Creator in virtue of being human beings made in the image and likeness of God. That this is basically an appeal to just a basic intuition that we have, that all human beings are created equal before God, and we are deserving of fundamental human rights. The first among these is the right to life. Other than that, I would just make a logical argument against abortion. This is pretty straightforward and simple. It would go like this. The first premise would be that it is always wrong to directly and intentionally kill an innocent human life. Premise 2, abortion is the direct and intentional killing of an innocent human life. Therefore, abortion is always wrong. It really is that simple. And when we have these conversations about abortion, a lot of pro-abortion advocates try to bring a lot of complexity to this issue that I would say is pretty much black and white. I'm not saying that human life is not, the moral situations are not complex and difficult, and I'm not saying it's not difficult to make the right decisions. But there's never a reason that you could possibly give me that would justify directly and intentionally killing an innocent human life, especially a baby. And that's exactly what's happening when we talk about abortion. Abortion, contrary to what you're going to see at the bottom of this YouTube video, is not a medical procedure that merely, quote unquote, ends a pregnancy. Abortion is the direct and intentional killing of an innocent human life in the womb. And these lives, these babies, these children who can't speak for themselves need people to speak for them. And that's part of the reason why we want to protect life, especially life in the womb.
Yeah, and it's not just a Catholic belief that life begins at conception. In fact, there's a study, and I wish I could quote it exactly, but it's something like 116 out of 120 scientists that did this study agree that life begins at conception. Yeah. And it was a secular study. It's not a faith-based opinion that life begins at conception. There's not a real logical point that you can make of life begins at another place that doesn't get torn down by reason. We don't need our Catholic faith, as you said earlier, to deny that.
Absolutely. And that's just why there's plenty of people who are not Catholic, not Christian, who are still against abortion if they're just willing to be honest and recognize the science. And as you point, I'm glad you pointed that out. Yes, it's that's why I actually like the way that Trent Horn titled the chapter and kind of the focus of the way we're framing this episode, why we protect life, as opposed to something like why we believe all life begins at conception. I mean, I do believe that, but it's more than a belief.
Right.
It's a scientific fact. It's not merely an opinion or something that rests upon merely theological doctrine or teaching. It fundamentally rests upon just like, well, truth and extremely good scientific evidence that we have that this is not disputed. Open up any scientific textbook, and a unique human being is created at the moment of fertilization.
And I think, I can already predict the comments on the YouTube if anyone watches the video.
Yeah.
That would be about like, well, what about the death penalty, and what about immigration and all these other rights issues, life issues, which are certainly important to talk about.
Yeah.
But Sean and I were discussing this earlier of like, this is the voice for the voiceless. The unborn are human beings by nature of science. They have a right to life by reason, we already deduced. And these people cannot advocate for themselves.
Yes.
And that's why we fight for life.
And abortion, among those issues you stood out, also stands out in the fact that it's the only one of those things that's an intrinsically evil action. So not long ago, like Pope Leo, God bless him, was off the cuff responding to, it doesn't really matter the situation, but basically in his response, he talked a little bit about like that we should be for all life, that we should be for the life of immigrants. We should be against the death penalty as Catholics. We should certainly be against abortion. He was clear about that as well. And I don't just necessarily disagree with any of those things. The difference is that, like, yeah, we should definitely be against the inhumane treatment of immigrants, but there's nothing intrinsically evil about the concept of borders and protecting your own citizens, and deportation is not an intrinsically evil action. It should be done with a great respect for the human person and the dignity of the human person. But there are situations in which, according to our faith, that can be acceptable. And even in principle, there are situations in which the death penalty could be permitted. Currently, the teaching of the church is that it's inadmissible, but it's not an intrinsically evil action, which is why the church has taught that there are situations in which it can be justified, but just not under our current cultural conditions. Abortion is the only one of those three things that is what's called an intrinsically evil action, which is an action that's wrong by its very nature, meaning that there is never a circumstance or intention that could justify. Like, there's no situation which, this could be a reason to make abortion morally justified. There is no reason because of the quality of the action itself.
Yeah, just to wrap up the conversation about immigration, which I think is super important, and maybe we'll have another conversation about, but if you're looking for more of a Catholic perspective on that, I don't know if you saw this today, Sean, but it was just released by the Diocese of Springfield newspaper. Father Chris Chummer in the Diocese of Springfield just released an incredible article about the nuances of, like, we have the right to, people have the right to immigrate, and also countries have the right to protect their borders, and where does that fall? And it's a really awesome article. So if you're looking for more resources on that, maybe we'll link that below. But that's another video. But if you're right now wondering about Catholic stances on immigration, it's fantastic.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. It's great. I'll have to check that out as well. And again, the Catholic Church does have a great insight into all of these issues, and has been thinking about it and teaching about this for 2,000 years. And so the Catholic Church does have a lot to add to these conversations. But again, bringing it back to the conversation of abortion specifically, as I mentioned, abortion is something that's called an intrinsically evil action. This, again, just to repeat kind of the definition, an intrinsically evil action is an action that is wrong by its very nature. In and of itself, it's wrong, meaning that there is no good reason one could give in order to justify the morality of intrinsically evil actions. The action itself is always and everywhere in every circumstance wrong. Now, there could be intentions and there could be circumstances and conditions and consequences surrounding the actions that could change our responsibility or reduce our responsibility or add to it. But it can't determine or make something that's evil become a good thing. There's a document by John Paul II called Veritatis Splendor, the splendor of truth. And he has sort of a great reflection on that, the relationship between what we do, the object of the act, why we do it, and the circumstances surrounding our actions. And so this is what he says, and this is about the topic of intrinsically evil actions. So JP2 taught, if acts are intrinsically evil, a good intention of a particular circumstances a good intention or particular circumstances can diminish their evil, but they cannot remove it. Consequently, circumstances or intentions can never transform an act intrinsically evil by virtue of its object into an act subjectively good or defensible as a choice. I love this line here. The morality of an act is conditioned by the intention and circumstances, but it's not wholly determined by them. In other words, we can't do evil, and this is quoting the Catechism here, one may not do evil so that good may come from it. And that's essentially a good summary of what John Paul II is saying there. He's saying when an action is intrinsically evil, meaning it's wrong in and of itself by its very nature, yeah, it can be conditioned. Like our responsibility can be greater or lesser depending on why we do it or the circumstances surrounding those actions, certainly, right? You can appreciate the complexity of moral situations, but it can't make something evil become a good thing. And so it's a great principle. It's good for us to keep in mind that we cannot do something that's in and of itself evil just to bring about something that we perceive to be good. Our perception is not always accurate, but even if it were, we still can't do things that are in and of themselves evil just because we hope that a good thing will come from it. And a lot of time, this is where this issue of I think a false moral complexity is introduced in the topic of abortion, where it's like, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about this baby? This baby's going to go into the foster care system. The foster care system's terrible. And you want this baby to have this horrible life of poverty, or this mom doesn't have enough money to raise her kids that she already has. How can you say that this woman has to have her baby because, and then she's going to bring another child into a life of poverty, and then they're going to have a terrible life and a horrible life? Like, how could you possibly say that this woman's not allowed to have an abortion? Instead, she has to have this child, and then they're going to have this terrible life. Or what about a woman in these horrible circumstances in the instances of rape or incest? Like someone suffered in terrible trauma, and you're going to add trauma to their life, someone might say, by forcing them to give birth, by not allowing them to go through with this quote unquote procedure of an abortion. There's all of these conditions and circumstances and reasons and intentions that try to bring moral complexity to actually what we get back to is sort of a distraction from the main point. Is like, okay, so those are your reasons for doing what exactly? Oh, for directly and intentionally killing a baby in the womb.
Which is always evil.
Which is always evil. So it's like, I can have total sympathy and care and respect for all of the difficulties of life and the difficulties of doing the right thing. But none of those things is convincing to me at all that it would then justify killing a baby. And we recognize this for babies that are born. But for some reason, just because of the culture of death in our country and because of the culture of abortion, and I would say the misinformation and the lies that are spread about what it is, there's a lot of deception, and I think people just are wrong, have false views that this can be morally justified. Even though the same reasons would not justify killing born children, we use all sorts of reasons that appear to be complex to justify killing unborn babies. One of the things that Charlie Kirk would do that I thought was just rhetorically really strong whenever people would introduce moral complexity into this topic of abortion. For example, people would bring up, like, what about in the cases of rape? He would ask the question, he would say, there's one person in this crowd, it's a giant crowd. He's like, there's one person in this crowd who's conceived by rape. Can you tell me which one it was? And obviously the person has no idea, because regardless of how the person was conceived, it's still a unique human person who has dignity and certainly has the right to life. And they're certainly glad that they are alive and that they weren't killed, even though the circumstances surrounding their conception were not ideal.
Which is also a great defense of the life of those with disabilities, who some people would advocate for the abortions of like, if the baby's going to have Down syndrome or something like that.
Yeah.
Could you look them in the face and say, like, no, I wouldn't say that you have a life that's worth living.
Yeah.
I actually think your life should have been terminated before you were born.
Yeah.
There's a great video of a young man with Down syndrome testifying before Congress to this very, very fact, which is just awesome. It was like, would you tell me that my life is not worth living? Like, would you tell me that I didn't deserve to have this life because my life would be too miserable?
Yeah.
It's you can't make that decision for other people. It's evil.
And so a lot of these apparent complexities and even just the slogans of sort of the pro-abortion movement, like my body, my choice, are just like, well, that one in particular, it becomes nonsense. Because once you recognize that it's a scientific fact that all human life begins at fertilization, then slogans like my body, my choice become meaningless. Because we do have bodily autonomy. I absolutely believe in the right to bodily autonomy. But your bodily autonomy ends where another person's begins. And again, if the embryo, the fetus, the baby in the womb is a unique human life, then that baby has bodily autonomy, and we have no right to use our bodies to intentionally take the life of an innocent human being.
My right to swing my fist ends at your face.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So I cannot kill someone else's body.
Right.
They have the body.
So it always comes back to the simple question, what are or who are the unborn? Because if the unborn, if the fetus, if the embryo, if the baby in the womb is not really a human being, if it's just a clump of cells, if it's just, it's just whatever, if it's not really a human being, then why is abortion a big deal? Why is there complexity or difficulty to having abortion? Why do women not really want to have an abortion, but they have to? If it's just a clump of cells, it's no different than getting your appendix taken out, and so it's no big deal. But if the unborn are human beings, unique human beings, then they have a right to life. And we have no right to directly and intentionally kill their life, regardless of the reason, the intention, or the circumstances that we may find ourselves in. So the right to life fundamentally then is based not on what we can do, not on what a person is able to do, or where a person is located, or how dependent a person is on another person. But to be human is enough, So like I would ask the question, like, is the baby in the womb a human being? The answer is yes. The baby in the womb is a human being. Do all human beings deserve human rights? Yes, they do. And then the first right, the most fundamental right, is the right to life. And that's why we protect life, especially the life of the precious children in the womb.